Hello, dears, how are you? We often say, or we often listen, that this person has minded it. This person has taken something else personally. And I felt bad when somebody spoke about me, when somebody talked like that, when somebody did something like this one. I minded it, mean I took it personally. He took it personally, she took it personally, and that is why he is very unhappy, very sad because they took it personally, because he took it personally. So, what is all about it? Taking something personally, that is something what happens to us or what we do very frequently, very often. So, for that reason and purpose, it is very important indeed for us to be able to understand what is exactly meant by taking something personally, what are its effects upon our life, and if at all it is having negative impact upon our life, how can we avoid it, how can we steer clear of all that, rather how can we take advantage of it. So all of that surrounding the matter of taking something personally is going to be talked about, is going to be debated upon in our today's discussion. So let's begin with what is exactly meant by taking something personally, what is exactly meant by it. So there are five ways, there are four ways rather to look upon it, to understand it, or we can say that there are four aspects of it. Number one, it is internalizing others' opinions or actions as attack on oneself. Internalizing others' opinions or their actions as attack on oneself. So that is one aspect of taking something personally. Now the second aspect is that assuming others' behavior is about you, not them. Assuming others' behavior is about you, not them. So that is the second aspect of taking something personally. Now, the third aspect of it is over identifying with criticism or negative feedback. Over identifying with criticism or negative feedback by someone else. So that is also meant by taking something personally. Now, the fourth aspect of it is that feeling emotionally charged or defensive. When somebody becomes very angry, or that means that it has taken something, personally, or when somebody start defending oneself instead of ignoring it, so that also mean that this person has taken something very personally. So these are the four aspects of taking something personally. Now let's look upon it, that why it is important to avoid it, why it is so important to avoid taking something personally. And there are five major reasons. There are five major reasons. The reason number one is that it leads to unnecessary stress and anxiety. The one reason is that it leads to unnecessary anxiety and mental stress. If we want to avoid unnecessary mental stress or anxiety, we need to avoid taking something personally, not to take something personally. The second reason is that it damages relationships and communication. My communication with someone else, my relationship with someone else, your communication and your relationship with someone else, so it damages it a lot. So this is also an important reason not to take something personally at all. Now the third reason is that limit personal growth and learning. As far the learning is concerned, my learning, your learning, our learning, As for our personal growth, my personal growth, your personal growth is concerned, it damages it a lot. You know, it limits our learning, and it does limit our personal growth. Now the fourth important reason that why should we avoid it, so that reason is fosters defensiveness and reactivity. It makes us a reactionary person. It develops an attitude of reactivity in us, and it also makes us a defensive person who is always, you always defending oneself, presenting the argument that I'm not what you are assuming me. So, if at all, that is also important. Fosters defensiveness and reactivity. Now, the fifth and the last reason why it is so important to avoid taking something personally, and it is it impedes objective decision making. It does impedes objective decision making. All of us need to make the objective decision, but as for taking something personally is concerned, it does impede our objective decision making. Now, the third major reason that why it is important to avoid it, how to avoid it, there are five ways to avoid it. There are five ways to avoid it. Five. We earlier we talked about what exactly it is taking something personally. We spoke about the five major reasons why it is important to avoid it. Now we are going to talk about how to avoid it, and again there are five major reasons for that. Number one, major ways, major strategies, and major techniques to avoid it. Number one, it is practice self awareness and emotional regulation. Practicing self awareness. I need to be more about aware about myself. You need to be more aware about yourself. Knowing our strengths, knowing our weaknesses, knowing our values, knowing our emotions, and knowing what are my priorities in my life. So, knowing all the important things about me, so that is called self awareness. We do have to practice the self awareness, and also at the same time we need to regulate our emotion. We need to, as for the elimination of the emotions is concerned, it is not possible and there is no need to do that, but we need to maintain it, we need to regulate it. So that is the number one way is practice self-awareness and emotional regulation. Now the second way to avoid the taking something personally, it is it is it 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 is it is how to avoid it, and it separate your identity from external events, separating our identity from the external events. So that is very very important, not to make all the thing together. Rather we need to separate our identity from the external events of all type. Whatever somebody is saying, whatever somebody is doing, whatever is happening in the world, I need to separate my identity. You need to separate your identity from the external events. Now, the third way not to take something personally, it is focus on facts, not assumptions. Focusing on the facts. Do focus on the facts, but please do not focus on assumptions of anybody or even your own assumptions. Not to focus on the assumptions at all. Focus on the facts. And now the fourth way to avoid taking something personally, it is develop a growth mindset. Developing a growth mindset. What is this, by the way, and how can I develop, how can you develop the growth mindset? It is view criticism as feedback, and view criticism as feedback. Now viewing the hurdles, the obstacles, the troubles in my life for the purpose of learning, for the purpose of making myself a more resilient person. So that is develop a growth mindset. Now the fifth and the last way to avoid taking something personally, it is set boundaries and prioritize self-care. Setting the boundaries on the one hand and prioritizing the self-care on the other hand. Boundaries mean that limits. So everybody up to a limited extent, everybody up to a limited extent can interfere in my life, in my affairs, can poke their nose in my matters, but not beyond that at all. I don't allow anybody setting my boundaries. It is my right, it is my privilege, and not that of anybody else at all. So it is my right. So setting the boundaries on the one hand and then enforcing my boundaries does not mean being violent at all, but peacefully. I have every right, I have every ability to enforce my boundaries, not to allow anybody to violate it, not to allow anybody to overstep it. So that is set boundaries and then prioritizing self care, very very important indeed, self care. And these are the five major ways to protect ourselves from taking something else personally. And then there are certain things which can be called as the strategies. We need to understand what are the strategies. The strategy number one is use gray rock technique. What is this gray rock technique? It remains neutral, remain neutral, and that is called gray rock technique. Now, the second strategy is ask clarifying questions before reacting. Asking clarifying questions before reacting. Once you do ask the clarifying question, what is going to happen that they people will become defensive and they won't be having much of the right answers. So, as far being ashamed is concerned, it will go into their neck and not that of our at all. So that is ask clarifying questions before reacting. Now, the third strategy is practice mindfulness and meditation. Practicing of the mindfulness and practice of the meditation. What is this, by the way? Look, each one of us have a past. Each one of us have a past, and usually our past is filled with the regrets, with the repentance. Usually, our past is filled with the regrets, with the repentance. But we don't have to live in the past at all. Learn whatever we can out of the bitter experiences, out of our own mistakes, out of our own wrong decisions, learning whatever we can, but not to dwell in the past at all, not keep repenting, regretting at all, not keep repenting, regretting it all, and not to dwell in the past at all. Rather, let it go, learn it, and then let it go, let it go, let it go. All of us have a future as well. Usually the future is filled with the worries, but we don't have to keep worrying about the future at all. We need to plan whatever we can, then return to our present, then return to our today, then return to our present moment, and then focus and concentrate upon the present moment. It is called mindfulness. Also, on the one hand, we do have to practice the mindfulness. On the other hand, we do have to practice the meditation. Meditation is very important indeed, but I think if at all we fail to live in the present, we are either dwelling in the past, we are seen regretting, repenting in the past, we are seen worrying about the future. So that will be very bad life indeed. And then the fourth point of strategy importance is reframe criticism as opportunity for growth. Reframing criticism. The people are criticizing us. That is why some of us are taking it personally. We don't have to take anything else personally at all. Reframe criticism as opportunity for growth. Reframing the criticism as opportunity for growth. And the fifth and the last point of strategy is that surround yourself with the supportive people. Surrounding yourself with the supportive people. So these are the five strategies. So I think now there are certain reminders as well. And the reminder number one is that others' behavior reflects their own state. Others' behavior reflect their own state, not that of ours at all. The second reminder is, which we need to keep reminding ourselves, you can't control others, but you can control your response. You cannot control others. but you can control your own response. The third and the last thing to remember is your worth isn't defined by external validation. Your worth is not defined by external validation at all. So, my dear friends and fellows, I think our today's topic is highly beneficial because, on the one hand, we define what is meant by taking things personally, then we spoke about why to avoid it, and then after that, we spoke about how to avoid it. After that, we talked about certain strategies, and now at the end, there are certain reminders as well. I think the topic is very important because each one of us keep taking the things personally, and as long as keeping something else personally is concerned, it does spoil our life, and we don't have to spoil, we don't have to destroy our life at all. We do have to avoid the unnecessary mental stress and tension. So that is all from me today. Thank you very much.